All right, give it a couple more seconds. It's starting to record, but we're going live here in a couple more. All right. Looks like we're live. Welcome everybody to our Saturday legislative update for the Washington State Fraternal Order of Police. Before I do introductions, Marco, our state president, is back in Nashville attending meetings. I believe Chad's there as well. But he's unable to attend this morning. He wanted me to pass on that he's sorry he had to miss, but there was some pressing matters back in Nashville. So with that, I'm just going to go from left to right at the top of the screen. Chad, you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, Chad Petersick, Washington State Chaplain.
Bill?
I'll say good morning. Washington State Eastside Vice President.
Charles?
Good morning as well. I'm Charles Porsche, the Lodge 36 president.
Banner?
Right. Excuse me, Brian Banner. Good morning, all. The chairman of trustees.
And Holt?
Good morning. Holt Woodhill, Spokane Lodge president.
Yeah. Michael?
Michael Transu, and I'm the contract lobbyist for the Washington State Fraternal Order of Police.
And my name is James Shumsher. I'm the West Side Vice President. And yes, for me, it is good morning. Today, before Michael gets started with some of the bills, we thought we would have Charles, who's our representative on data collection for the AG's office, to give us an update on what's going on with data collection. As you guys know, we had quite a few appointments to various boards, commissions, or working groups. And so Charles is one of those. So with that, Charles, take it away.
All right, kind of short and sweet for the most part. So we've been going around with this for a couple of months now, probably almost 3 months actually, with various meetings, with several more to go to end up sometime in March here. So the basis of the data collection is just that there's approximately 30-ish elements that the AG and the legislator put into place there to collect data for law enforcement. So we've had a lot of spin up on getting background on things, with just recently actually getting into the nuts and bolts of what some of the data is and any additional data to be presented with that. So most of the stuff is very basic that I would hazard a guess that any agency collects the majority of anyway. But the discussion now is just going around what types of additional data. So to give a little context to that, there's a lot of talk in the bill about citizens being able to have input during uses of force, incidents that happen, and collecting data on all of the various things as far as just the calls for service, a traffic stop, self-initiated activity by officers, and the like. And so some of the talk, unfortunately, I guess is a good way to put it, has been around trying to get this huge amount of context developed into a data point, which is, I think, super challenging and near impossible. They being a lot of the citizen groups, not only just want that, okay, here's the data of when an officer and what type of force they used, but what's the context that brought all of that to happen, which is just way, way, way too far in depth. So we're working to scale that all back on just collecting the data, the simple data points, putting those into some dashboards, and then pushing it forward to the contractors to decide what that looks like. So several agencies have different dashboards that we've explored what those look like, just for some context for us. And we'll keep doing that. One ask that, well, there's a couple of things that are going to happen. There's a survey that's been put together that's going to go out to all the agency heads. So if you have some connection with your agency head on what that little survey looks like, it's a lot of the data points already, just to get feedback from them on how quickly they can place that information into the whatever the portal is going to look like, and that it sufficiently covers everything that is being looked for. So if you could touch base with them whenever they get it, and what that looks like. And then whatever systems, if you guys have some different systems that you use for collecting data at your agency during a use of force, I'd be super interested to hear about it. The 4 of us law enforcement that are in the collection, data collection task force, all use Blue Team and IA Pro. So if there's something else, which I know there is, out there that you use that you like, please get in touch with me and let me know what that is. And I'll just take some questions on anything else.
So Charles, I'll just chime in with one. Is there still discussions about using coders to input hard copy reports into the system where there's an agency who doesn't have any any sort of a software program that uploads all their use of force data points and such, or are we just talking trying to use an electronic system for everybody?
Right now it's stuck. It's just the electronic system to input the data. The report stuff got into the context talk that went on for a long time. So we went away from that, but I'm sure it'll come back. And I think that's something that's going to be placed more on the contractor that wins the bid to implement the system rather than our group to try to piece that part in there.
Got it.
The only thing I would add is maybe you should talk to Holt from Spokane there offline. They have a pretty comprehensive system there. And I know that there's probably 25 agencies that utilize that system in the state, and there's probably hundreds that utilize it. The problem with Blue Team and iPro, it's labor intensive on our side, and whatever moves forward for us needs to be less labor intensive on the law enforcement side and more on the contractor side, kind of what you alluded to.
Will do. We'll touch base over the next week or so.
Yeah, sounds good, Charles.
Yeah, because Holt, aren't you tracking over in Spokane just like over 100 data points?
Probably at least that many.
Okay.
Okay,
All right.
is that all you got, Charles?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's been pretty cut and dry. So far, there's a lot of minutia, honestly, that's been talked about that I think is completely irrelevant. And our task force leader basically recently gave all of us a survey on how things are going, and the tide has changed after the results of that survey. So I think we're a little bit more on task now.
I like that.
Perfect. All right, Michael, take us away.
All right. Well, welcome to the 27th legislative day. In 3 more days will be the 30th legislative day, which will put us right smack dab in the middle of session. Process wise, policy committee cutoff was this last Thursday. And I'm going to talk about a few bills that did not make it out of policy committee, and unless made necessary to implement the budget, are for all intents and purposes no longer alive this session. But again, I always caveat that on nothing's dead till they go down sine die, and there's always folks out looking for titles and of bills that are still alive that dead bill substance can fit under. So yeah, and then this coming Monday at 5 p.m. is what's called the fiscal committee cutoff. And that means all bills that are necessary to be funded in the budget must be passed out of either the appropriations committee or the ways and means committee by next Monday. And then the legislature, then they will have nothing but floor action between this coming Monday and the following Tuesday, where the House will pass over House bills to the Senate, and the Senate will pass over Senate bills to the House. And then believe it or not, after February 15th, we start doing the same thing all over again in the opposite body, public hearings, more executive action on opposite body bills, and, boiling down to about the last 10 days, 7 days of session, where they just kind of put the nuts and bolts of the budget together and talk about, debate bills that are in contention or dispute as between the House and the Senate. So I'll walk down the agenda that James put out, and then after we get done with officer wellness, I want to just talk briefly about a handful and a half of bills that are still alive that we're keeping our eyes on, that we're not necessarily working really hard to get past, focusing more on our priorities. But I do want to make certain that you all know that in addition to the ones that are the highest, priorities for us, there are several other bills that are perking along that we're keeping our eye on too. So I'll start with the pension bills that are up there, House Bill 1701 and Senate Bill 5652. And remember, those are the left two board bills for the benefit improvement, the lump sum 2.5% multiplier. Both of those bills are in their respective rules committees and ready to be voted on by the full body. Sometimes in instances where there are bills like this that are companion bills that are moving along kind of at the same time and at the same pace, the majority party at some point in time will make a decision as to which one is the vehicle, and then move one or the other along. Just from a time management standpoint, bills take time and staff time to get briefed up, to get heard, to get testimony, sign-ins and all of that. So from a time management standpoint, sometimes they do, pick a vehicle, and the majority party agrees that that's the one that's going to go through. So both of those bills are waiting to be debated and voted upon by their respective bodies, and we'll see how we go over the next week and see which one they choose is going to be the one that moves forward. The other bills that are out there, military service credit, House Bill 1804 and Senate Bill 5726. And those are also, remember, the left two board bills on interrupted military service, and whether or not which certificate somebody gets so that they can continue to get the benefit of being deployed, and have their left two benefit not impacted. The House passed the bill last week, 96-0, and the Senate bill has an executive session scheduled for it day after tomorrow in Senate Ways and Means. So that too may end up like 1701 and 5652, and the majority party will have to decide which one of those is going to be the vehicle, given that they're both moving along. The last two I'll mention is our 1669 and 5748. The agenda just shows 1669, but the companion bill 5748 is in Senate rules. And remember, these are the two bills that were put forth by the Pension Policy Committee, but these are the bills that allow for disability benefits up to 70% of final average salary max across the board and all the pension systems. 5748 is in Senate rules, and 1669, I'm not quite certain where that one is in the process. And then the last one is House Bill 1752 that isn't on our agenda, and the House passed that this past week. And remember, that's the bill that allows for a Roth option to deferred comp plans that exist out there today. So it's something that I think most folks kind of thought that the Department of Retirement Systems could do on their own, like through rule. But at the end of the day, it was probably something to just get a little bit of a legislative head nod that it was an okay thing to do, just so that, being a little bit more on the conservative side. So I'll stop there, James, on retirement bills, and see if there are any questions anybody has before I move on to the next bills.
Nothing on Facebook.
Okay. And just a note to everybody, I guess, we can watch the Facebook chat. So if you got any questions, pop them into Facebook and James will relay them out. The next two set of bills are House Bill 1719 and House Bill 1735. And remember, 1719 is the bill that clarifies the 50 cal language that was in a bill from last year. And House Bill 1735 is the bill that clarifies all of the instances when peace officers have the ability to use physical force. And remember, this is the Involuntary Treatment Act, child custody cases, court orders, verbal and written, and the like. So there's a laundry list there, and I don't have them in front of me, but those bills passed out of the House late the week before last. And those bills have a public hearing scheduled in the Senate Law and Justice Committee this coming week on the 8th of February. So we will, at least at this point in time, try to save the committee chair some time and just sign up in favor of those two pieces of legislation. They had a really good vote coming off of the House floor, both of them. I think 1719 was unanimous, and then 1735 had, I think, 4, maybe 5 no votes. And those were on the Republican side and, largely related to instances where those particular members, I think, wanted to go all the way back to pre-2021 session and kind of go back to what I would call sort of the way things were before the 2021 session bills. But that just didn't happen. So those bills are moving along pretty well. And gosh, we hope those can get out of the Senate and get to the governor's desk as quickly as possible. Be nice to have something off of our plate and be able to focus on other things. So I'll stop there and see if there's anything question wise on 1719 and 1735.
Keep going.
Okay. Next couple of bills are probably the two we're spending the greatest amount of time on every week. And that's House Bill 2037, which is Representative Goodman's bill modifying the standard for use of physical force by peace officers. And then Senate Bill 5919, which is Senator Vandewey's bill that relates to the authority for law enforcement to detain and pursue persons. I'll probably maybe jump a little bit back and forth here once we get started, but I'll just kind of start with House Bill 2037. And James, remind me to let folks know we did a press release on these two bills too. House Bill 2037 was passed out of committee on Thursday. It passed out on a vote of 11-2. So really strong bipartisan vote. I would note that the 2 no votes on that bill were one of the more conservative Republicans on the committee and one of the most progressive Democrats on the committee. Representative Jenny Graham and Representative Tara Simmons both voted no on the proposed changes, and the rest of the committee voted aye. So really good bipartisan vote coming out of committee. There were a couple amendments adopted, one by Representative Goodman and then one by Representative Hackney. The Goodman amendment clarified that after, and this is Representative Goodman's bill, authorizes use of force if a person is fleeing a Terry stop. And he inserted some language that stop a person who is actively fleeing from a lawful temporary investigation. And he added some words in there that we're okay with, that provides that the person has to be given notice that he or she is being detained and is not free to leave. We felt that that was some good language, both the Representative Goodman and Senator Dingra both like in terms of Terry stops. As I think James would say, we felt that standard was clear and trainable. The Criminal Justice Training Commission indicates they can trained to that standard. So we're okay with the bill as it popped out of committee. Again, really strong vote, 11-2. On the Senate side, a little bit different of a take. Senator Dingrat had a proposed substitute that amended the definition of physical force and inserted definition of physical force that we had been working on with the community groups and WASPIC that we're okay with. The biggest contention in that definition was where the words compliant handcuffing were placed, either as part of the definition of physical force or as being excluded from the definition of physical force. The important distinction being, obviously, if it's excluded from the definition, compliant handcuffing is something that can go on all of the time. Whereas if it's included in the definition of physical force, compliant handcuffing would be limited to those instances where physical force is authorized, and that would be the House Bill 1735 items, and then the Terry stop and the court order items that Senate Bill 5919 is adding. So, and also in her amendments, she reverted the definition of imminent threat of serious physical injury or death to the current statutory definition. The original bill had an odd definition of imminent threat in it. So she just reverted back to that, which is what in House Bill 1310 now. And she also took some language out trying to modify the reasonable care standard and just again reverted back to the current statutory language in House Bill 1310 that was adopted in 2021. Like House Bill 2037, that bill and those amendments had a very strong vote coming out of the Law and Justice Committee, 7-1. So you had my senator, Senator Trudeau, who what I would say kind of left her vote kind of open. She wanted to check in with some more of her community, some law enforcement and some impacted families in terms of a version of the definition of physical force that she would prefer. And I think she felt that, maybe the definition of compliant handcuffing needed some further discussion. So she voted no, and then Senator Jim Honeyford on the Republican side voted the bill out without recommendation. But all of the other Republicans and Democrats voted for it. Again, in Michael's humble opinion, a really good, solid, bipartisan piece of work and vote coming out of committee, which, in today's environment, sometimes that's hard to come by. But for James and me, I think we feel pretty good about, the work we did in terms of the definition work. Spent a lot of time in a lot of meetings talking to folks about, what that definition should look like. Is it trainable? Is it clear? Is it concise? Does it make your all's job easier day to day? And we feel these words that are moving through will do that. On the compliant handcuffing piece, we understand where the community group's view is, and we understand where the other law enforcement groups are in terms of having compliant handcuffing be either being in the definition or out of the definition. And some of that relates to reportability. If it's in the definition of physical force, then compliant handcuffing becomes a reportable item in reports. And a couple of things. I've come to understand that I think whether or not or something is reportable is left up to each, agency for now. One of the things we said was if it's not clear that it doesn't have to be reported, then you can put some language in there that says it's not reportable. But then I'm reminding folks, as well as the work that Charles is doing with 5259 and how that data collection effort might impact the reportability of something like that across the state. So a lot of things going on as it relates to, compliant handcuffing. But, at the end of the day, I'll also say that Representative Simmons, who also voted no on the House side, I think really just wanted some more time to talk to her community and kind of reach out to her district and, do a little bit more analysis before she was comfortable with the bill. So I'm holding the nose, kind of, we'll see how we go when it gets to the floor. Then the last thing I'll mention on 2037 is there were 6 amendments proposed. 2 were adopted, 2 were withdrawn, 1 failed, and 1 was determined to be out of scope. And the 2 that were adopted were the Goodman Amendment and the Hackney Amendment. And the Hackney Amendment, remember, was an insertion of the definition of physical force that we like. So with that, 1 amendment on the Senate side on 5919, there was an amendment by Senator Honeyford to reinsert the vehicular pursuit section of Senate Bill 5919, and that motion and amendment was defeated. So vehicular pursuits, while they started out being in 5919, are not in the current version as it passed out of committee. On that note, I will let you know that House Bill 1788 passed out of the House Public Safety Committee on Thursday, and that was Representative Robertson's vehicular pursuit bill. It didn't have as strong a support passing out. It passed out 9-4. So there were 4 Ds on that side of the aisle that weren't comfortable with reporting out a vehicular pursuit bill. I would note that Representative Orwell on the D side, Representative Orwell, Representative Hackney, and Representative Goodman were on the yay side of that vote along with all of the Republicans. So with that, James, I will stop and see if you've got any questions. If there are any finer points you'd like to add on that very long description, my apologies, but I hope that puts everybody in the right spot.
No, you're good. You did an excellent job. A couple of things I want to point out. There's a lot of people on this call today and some that aren't. On Tuesday morning, this was our topic for the whole meeting. We had a very good discussion. So I want to have a shout out to Charles and Holt and Jeff and Naya, who's not on the call, but we had a very good conversation about, the definition of physical force. And the assertion of the language from Representative Goodman that's going to require officers to tell people they're not free to leave and they're there investigating a crime. We all kind of agreed, hey, we already do that. That's good police work. And it just codifies what good police work looks like in statute. So I just want to give a shout out to the guys that were on that Tuesday morning call last Tuesday. A lot of good collaboration, a lot of hard work. And the only other finer point I would put, Representative Simmons' exact comment was, I reserve my right to reverse my vote later after I have some time to look at it. So I think that's I think that's a signal where this is going for the FOP. This definition of physical force and 2037 are in a good place. We know that other law enforcement groups did not like it and opposed it. One in particular, and they were the authors, I would say, of Representative Graham's amendment to change it back, which was ruled out of order. That being said, we are the FOP. We are that one voice, as you heard our national president say this week, and we're going to stick to what we do best. And that is represent our members in the best way we can, in a collaborative way, making good policy that we can all work with together with our communities.
All right, anything else on that one? Anything in Facebook? Anything on Facebook, James? I got nothing in the chat. Okay. All right, the next couple of bills down in there where James has got on the agenda did not make it out of policy committee cutoff. With all due respect to my governmental affairs guy, those 2 bills, 5691 and 1845, are still alive. 5691 is the prosecutorial reporting bill, and that's the bill. It was skinning down as it came out of committee. It's a bill that we've been sponsored by Senator Gildon that we're very supportive of, and requires prosecutors to report their number of referrals and number of actual cases that are filed. City attorneys were removed out of the bill, and elected county prosecutors were the only ones left in. So definitely skinny down a little bit. And some amendments were adopted in committee to add some specific juvenile offenses and a couple of misdemeanors that also were going to be reported upon. So we hope that bill keeps moving along. It's in rules, and we're going to try to help. It passed out on a party line vote. We're going to try to help Senator Gildon, if we can, get some Republican support for that bill and get it over to the House. House Bill 1845 is body cam grant program bill that also is sitting in Senate rules. Again, not one of our highest priorities, but definitely something we're supportive of, and definitely something we'll work on getting moving forward as well. Those body cam grants are something that we've always been very supportive of. On the dead bill side, and again, as you guys and gals have heard me, I always caveat that on necessary to implement the budget. House Bill 1202, the Qualified Immunity Bill, did not pass out of the House Civil Rights and Judiciary Committee. There's always a chance it can be revived on a budget implementation, on a budget proviso side. So for all intents and purposes, it doesn't appear to be going anyway this session, but I always caveat it that they've got about 33 more days to go, and everything isn't dead until that final sine die gavel goes down. So, or gavels go down. The other bill that did not make it out of the policy committee was House Bill 1507, and that was the statewide independent prosecutor bill that we worked really hard on over the interim, and just went as the prime sponsor went back to the original bill as introduced, and that being the vehicle. It's just something that we couldn't support. So and others, the community groups as well, who couldn't support for a lot of different reasons. So that bill also doesn't appear to be going anywhere for the remainder of the session. And that too will be probably a pretty significant independent or interim project to see how we can keep that ball rolling on a statewide independent prosecutor. So I'll stop there, see if there are any questions on those two bills that are still moving. So again, 5691 and 1845 are still moving. So any questions on those?
So I don't see any questions on Facebook, Michael, but around 1507, there's been some question about why we supported an independent prosecutor from some of our members in the Yakima Valley. So I want to put this to bed. So if there's not an independent prosecutor, if you think the local prosecutor is going to be in control of this process, you are wrong. Michael and I and our legislative team early on in this process had received information that after the Office of Independent Investigation gets up and running, the governor will order every OIS that the Office of Independent Investigations handles to be reviewed and possibly prosecuted by the AG. That was our driving force. We did not want the AG doing these investigations, and for a lot of reasons. And so the other reason we engage with the community groups, it's the right thing to do. Solve problems together. But let me be clear. We already have one case that's been reviewed and prosecuted by the AG. We are now going to see more of that, whether you agree with it or not, or how it was done. That's going to be how it's going to be handled from this point on. So for us, we thought having an independent prosecutor, sterile from as much political influence as possible, reviewing these cases was the best way to go. And we still stand by that. I think that is the right position. I think everybody on this call knows deep down inside that is the right position. Other law enforcement groups were more worried about keeping status quo, and that's fine. They're there advocating for those, and that's what they should do if they so feel it's right. But for the FOP, we want to work on our things together with our community. We want to make sure that our members get the fairest shot without political influence when it comes to these. And we felt that having an independent prosecutor, and we still feel, and as Michael alluded to, we will continue to work on having an Office of Independent Prosecution to review all these cases. Okay.
Okay. All right, officer wellness is the next item on our agenda. Just know that I would tell you that the budget request that we talked about last week is moving forward with Representative Levitt and Senator Levick on the Senate side. So they're both making complementary requests of budget folks. And again, this is to add about $1.5 million to the wellness grants that were exhausted in legislation last year. So they'll add about $1 million, $1,095,000 or 95. Yeah, $95,000 to the $405,000 that was already appropriated. And then another $1 million to coordinate, as we talked about last week, a mobile online or mobile-based application for folks. So that I think James mentioned that his agency uses that he's pretty pleased with. So, and folks can utilize it with anonymity and such. So that's pretty good. And before we get into Q&As, I'm just gonna, these will be on the report that gets shoved out here sometime this weekend, but there are also I don't want to say a lot of other bills that we got our eyes on that, we aren't focusing as much on, but I'm just going to go through those. Representative Stokesbury has House Bill 1787 on helping law enforcement recruitment and retention at the local agency, has some hiring bonus language and stuff like that. We totally support that bill with one exception in it. There's some dollars in there for extra classes at the CJTC, and that's just something we don't think is appropriate, is an appropriate spend right now. As you all know, we've been supportive of regional academies, and that's just something that we'd like to hold off on and maybe do some study on, but otherwise we're supportive of that. Senator Cooterer has a bill from last year, 5089, that relates to hiring practices and, whether or not somebody should have a degree, how much training. That's a bill that we've pretty consistently opposed as well. House Bill 1941 on active shooter drills is something that we're also opposed to. We haven't taken a strong position on it yet. But again, something that we're opposed to, and we'll make folks know if asked that that's our position. Senate Bill 5485, which is a bill by Senator Wynn to undo traffic stops for various types of offenses, and I don't recall the list, and it's everything from taillights and expired tabs and those sorts of things. We signed up in opposition of that bill on Wednesday. It had an interesting referral. It went to the Senate Transportation Committee rather than the Law and Justice Committee, which I thought was kind of interesting. But again, we signed up in opposition to that bill, and we'll see if it makes it out of the Senate Transportation Committee on Monday. Senate Bill 5555. That's a Senator Vandewey bill that provides for training and certification for dispatchers. That bill is in the Senate Rules Committee, and we signed up and submitted written testimony in strong support of that bill, and have indicated to the senator we'll do anything that's needed to keep that bill moving this session. Senator Wagner has Senate Bill 5644, which is a bill that we support that enhances the mobile, I call them mobile crisis response teams. Some folks call them co-responder teams. So we're supportive of that legislation. Remember, Senator Wagner was our legislator of the year for the last couple of years. So really good guy, and happy to support that piece of legislation. Also, Senate Bill 5841, which is a bill by Senator Holy. That is a grant program to cities and counties to help them incentivize the hiring and retention of peace officers. It's in Senate Ways and Means. And so it's got to get out of the Senate Ways and Means Committee by Monday. If that bill continues to move forward, we'll see how we go. And we're happy to support it moving forward as well to, provide those dollars to cities and counties to again, help incentivize peace officer employment. The last one I want to mention, I mentioned a little bit earlier, my discussions on 2037 is House Bill 1788. While vehicular pursuits came out of Senate Bill 5919, the House Bill 1788 concerning vehicular pursuits, which is prime sponsored by Representative Robertson, as I noted, did pass out of committee on a 9-4 vote. So that bill will likely, I think it'll probably have to go to Ways and Means, but that's a really good question. And again, had a handful of 4 Democrats vote for it coming out of committee. So it at least has a chance to move forward. That's a piece of legislation on vehicular pursuits that we haven't, really taken a position on. I think we've talked about, reimagining pursuits and, maybe doing some interim work on how that might look. As near as I can tell, due to Section 1 with regard to vehicular pursuits coming out of Senate Bill 5919, I think Senator Dingra has made it clear that she would like to see pursuits reimagined and maybe studied over this interim to see if there's a better mousetrap that we can come up with vehicular pursuits. So with that, I will stop talking and see if there are any questions on any of that stuff. And let's see if James and anybody else, if I've missed anything.
So 1788, I want to be very clear. The version that passed out was heavily amended. It's not the original version of the bill. So one of the reasons we haven't taken a position on it is because we need some time to review those amendments and get some clarity. So, for us, I agree with Michael. I think Senator Dingra is of the mind, and for those who are not as familiar with the process as we are, Senator Dingra is in charge of law and justice over in the Senate. She's a prosecutor in her day job, so she understands the need for pursuits. However, I think that's the direction they're heading. But again, the version that made it out was heavily amended. So take a look at it. If you have any questions, reach out to us. So with that, I think there's no questions on Facebook. There's no questions in the chat. I know that Chad's back at National and he's got some info for us from the National. So I'd like to give Chad a couple of minutes of our time if we could.
Thanks, James. Hey, real quick, Michael, on 5555, is there any funding attached to that? I know that's a long shot, but I was curious if there was.
I believe that has, let me look really quick, Chad, and I'll see. I believe there is they're called funding out clauses, which makes policy bills subject to appropriation. But let me check right now, and that would obviously be something that would have to have funding attached to it. So let me look.
While you're looking, I'll not to wait, just to make good use of the time here. I am fortunate enough and blessed to be back here in Nashville for the National Wellness and Leadership Matters Conference. I've been here all week. I know there's a lot of stuff going on in Washington, and sometimes we get drilled in on that for good reasons. But there's a lot of stuff going on nationally as well. And one of the great things about this organization is that the FOP works on all levels for us, and that's locally, state, and nationally. And on the national level, there is just a ton of stuff going on. The national board is working tirelessly to help change the narrative in this country, and it's starting to work. You'll see a lot of the news outlets as of late within the last week, unfortunately spurred by law enforcement deaths. But the conversation has been that people are sick and tired of very lax laws, very lax prosecutors. There's starting to be some pushback. Even the liberal outlets are starting to see that the crime rates and the narrative that has been pushed out on us isn't working. And so the national board, they've got the app that you can download, the National FOP app. You can find it on both Google and Apple App Store, constantly putting out there the message that the FOP is engaging with legislators on a national level and every news outlet that they've got relationships with. I encourage that app and then I know I'm involved with the Yakima Lodge app as well on, Facebook's app. So if if you've got questions, certainly reach out to any member that that's in a leadership role in the FOP, but there are other outlets out there. I encourage you to go to them. Make no mistake that the FOP isn't just a fraternal group. No matter that, in my opinion, is our strongest point, is that we are a fraternal group. The things we do for our members in the time of need, you won't see that from any of the other local groups in our state or nationally. We take care of our own. But beyond that, and again, that's what I think we do the best. But beyond that, we are engaged on all levels to again, change this narrative, get it back to sanity. Things are never going to go back to the way they were, for good or bad. Law enforcement of the 90s when I started, that's long gone. And probably some of it for good reason. But if you're sitting around complaining that things aren't the way they should be, and we've got to take a hard stance and yell and scream and object to everything that comes down the pike, that just isn't the way things get done, and the FOP is getting it done. So, Michael, that's all I've got to say, James. I appreciate the time and the soapbox. If you found something, Michael, I'm done.
So it passed out of Ways and Means. It had a $30,000 fiscal note. So as near as I can tell right now, there is a little bit of funding that goes with it on the military department side to implement it. And that's the 911 and the PSAP folks. So it looks like it doesn't have as large of a fiscal note as I would have expected it to. So it seems to be moving along pretty good.
Is that 30,000 per agency, or is that 30,000?
It was 30,000. It was 30,000 a biennium. And if I get down there, because that required that board to, establish some.
It's $30,000 to develop the certification and curriculum for that
Yep.
board.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
To annually, $15,000 annually to administer the certification board and a statewide training program, which again seems low to me, but God bless them for keeping a low fiscal note.
So if I understand that right, then to get dispatchers certified the cost of that will be on the agency.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
And Chad, that's probably negotiable, I think, right? I think one of the big things talking to our, and this was an ask from the dispatch world, call receiver world. And I think one of the things that they wanted is they've never been called first responders. They've never been part of our community, but as you guys know, they're an intricate part of our community. They're the ones taking these calls, and they don't get to see the outcomes like we do. And so, but they're an integral part of the first responder process. And I think one of the biggest shining points about this bill is that it finally identifies them as first responders. And so I think this is a start of a conversation. And if our membership wants us to be engaged and make sure there's funding there for the finish of that conversation, we'll be glad to jump on it.
Just to carry that conversation one step further, a lot of the wellness stuff that I'm involved with also includes communications as part of our first responder family, as they should be.
Yep.
Right
Yeah.
on.
And if this thing gets going and if this thing gets out of here, gets approved and goes into law, I mean, I think the follow-up is there are going to be agencies that want to get their folks certified that probably don't have the dough. And then we can start having budget discussions on grants to local governments to get this stuff done.
Amen.
And to pass just one last thing, I keep saying that, but dispatchers and communications can be a part of the FOP. They can be members as well. So it's not just a gun and badge toting group. You can join as an alternate or
associate.
Associate. Thank you. You can join as associate member and have almost all of the benefits aside from voting rights with the FOP, and you deserve to have that protection.
Amen. All right, Charles, you're up. You got anything to add?
Nothing to add from me. Thank you.
Holt?
Good. Thanks for your guys' time.
Yep. Bill?
No, I'm good. Thanks a lot.
All right, so I'm just going to close this out. I think today has been a really good meeting. I appreciate everybody listening on Facebook, and I appreciate I'm watching on Facebook. Remember, this will be uploaded to YouTube, WAFOP TV. We've had a lot of interest on our YouTube channel, a lot of views, a lot of shares. Much appreciated. The last thing I'll close you with, remember, we can't help what happens outside the FOP. You heard Chad say, we take care of our own, and we take that very seriously, especially in Olympia. We're here representing you. We're not here to do things the way they've always been done. We're here to work with anybody and everybody that wants to make good policy, and especially takes care of our members. So our guiding principle in Olympia, as it is at the national, is to be that one true voice for law enforcement. And that's what we're doing. So again, thank you for tuning in today. We'll see you all next week. Please be safe out there, and take her easy.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate